Deering. I'm the Executive Director of the Society to Preserve the Millvale Murals of Vanka. As many of you know well, our mission is to save and share the 25 murals painted by immigrant artist Vanka on the walls of St. Nicholas Croatian Catholic Church in Millvale. It's a pleasure to be restarting our Table Talk series with a focus on our educational outreach initiatives that are supported in part by the Grable Foundation. Tonight's program, Living and Learning Our Way to Justice with the Vanka Murals, is an introduction and exchange about the educational resources, opportunities, and ideas we've been developing via a highly collaborative process with many voices to take the murals off the walls and into the community, the classroom, and beyond. So I get the chance, I'm the one who's got to do a few housekeeping pieces. So I'm going to do a couple things, make a few mentions before I turn it over to the team. First of all, thanks to those who added a donation to their registration. Your support makes this kind of programming possible, which is really central to our community engagement efforts. And if you haven't been to the church recently or on a tour, we are back and doing our regular Saturday tours at 11 and 12:30 and private tours on request. If you haven't also visited our new website recently, vankamurals.org, you can find the schedule a tour tab and sort of find out everything you need to know about making a visit. Our next Vanka Murals Table Talk, which is the continuation of our Other Voices, Other Walls series in collaboration with Hemispheric Conversations Urban Art Project, or Hiccup, probably one of the only other organizations with a name as long as ours, is on October 6th at 6:30 p.m. And it will feature international global street artists Ava Bracamontes and Sasha Reisen. And I'm going to drop the link into the chat for the registration for that program. And I'll also drop the link for the tours. And I'm going to also put another link in there because we need our network like you to help us spread the word about a call for artists. It's a BIPOC immigrant artist opportunity we're working on with the Opportunity Fund. And we really need your help to spread the word and help us to reach artists to respond. And the deadline for that is October 15th, but look in the chat for all of those links and pick them up when you can. So one thing I'm just going to mention for our panelists is that as you've probably all been part of these programs before, the chat is open, as you know, and we are happy to hear from you along the way. We also on this webinar have the Q&A function, so you can use the Q&A if you want to throw out a question you think might be of interest to everyone and want to make sure that we respond to it. So that's my housekeeping. I'm moving on to my introduction. We have the true pleasure of continued learning tonight with an exceptional team, Melissa Butler, Michelle King, and Becky Gaugler. Now I get to join you as a participant tonight because Becky Gaugler, who is our mostly new Director of Education and Interpretation, will be doing the hosting duties. I'm really enjoying this. So I get the privilege of introducing Becky, who has already made a huge and positive impact on our tour program and educational outreach efforts since starting her work with us as a consultant in 2019. She's been an independent museum educator since 2015. She's worked with the Heinz History Center, Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, Arts Education Collaborative, and the Mattress Factory. She's the co-founder and co-chair of Pittsburgh Museum Educators Roundtable, or PITMER. And in her previous position, she was the assistant curator of education at the Carnegie Museum of Art. So Becky's first assignment was as a consultant with the Vanka Murals was to assess our tour program and support its ongoing development and professionalization. And despite the pandemic interruption, she's already made a big difference and she's really just getting started. So I'm excited that she's going to play host tonight and working with Michelle and Melissa, and I'm glad you're going to get to meet her. So she gets to move on with the honor of introducing Melissa and Michelle. So I'm going to give it over to Becky. And as I said, just watch the chats from me with the links to those programs and other opportunities that I mentioned. So enjoy the program.
So I'm going to introduce Melissa Butler and Michelle King, who I have had the pleasure of working with, and both of them began working here with the Vanka Murals as consultants before I was here, and even before I was a consultant. So let me read you their bios. Melissa A. Butler, she is an author and an educator specializing in the art of noticing and holistic learning design. She was a classroom teacher for 23 years and is founder of Reimagining Project. She has built a career of diverse projects embedded in practices of noticing, whether writing books, facilitating workshops, supporting families, or working collaboratively with organizations like with the Vanka Murals. Her expressions are guided by questions around slowness, not knowing, intrinsic motivation, curiosity, play, trust, and love. So we'll be hearing from Melissa first through today, and then a little bit later into the program, we'll be talking with Michelle King, who is an instigator of learning and a love activist. She's been a middle school social science teacher in public schools for over 22 years, including at Mount Lebanon and the Environmental Charter School. For those of you local might know those schools. Currently, Michelle is seeking to create dynamic learning experiences that inspire wonder, discovery, contradictions, frustrations, and joy. Her current interests are in game-based learning, design, restorative justice, equity, social justice, the environment, and teacher empowerment. Through her partnerships, again, like ones with the Vanka Murals, Michelle is helping to co-create equitable, empathetic learning experiences for all. So I think with a lot of the language that is in these, you can tell that we are a very thoughtful and compassionate group, and we're looking forward to bringing all of you into this conversation today and thinking about what we've done, where we're going, and what's next. So I wanted to say a thank you again. I know Anna mentioned this to the Grable Foundation before I got here as Director of Education back in March. The Grable Foundation had sort of started the Vanka Murals on this journey, and you're going to see this little path with the little dots throughout our presentation today to think about the programming here at the Vanka Murals as a journey, as something that is constantly reflecting on where we've been to look where we're going. And the Grable Foundation really started funding this project that is now kind of where we are today. The process has been very iterative. We test one thing and then we try it, tweak it, try it a little bit differently to keep building on that. So this is a little screenshot of, I don't expect you all to read everything in here, but these were some of the questions that Michelle and Melissa actually were both involved with a group of educators thinking about these questions and sort of in the beginning brainstorming where things were going and what we should reflect on. And I wanted to just sort of zone in right now on just that idea to connect. The connections between people, between the murals, however that word connect can mean. And tonight, I think connecting you to what we've been doing. And it's hard for me because I don't see your faces. I love being in person with people because I can sort of see and connect eye to eye. So this connections tonight are going to be a little bit, as much as we can be, participatory. So I wanted to just do a quick sort of overview of what we're going to do tonight. And then in that, I'll share a little bit of what we've been doing and what our programs are. Our goals all being rooted in this idea of social justice framework, which started with some of those questions I just showed you. And as I said, Melissa and Michelle are both going to ask you all as guests to participate as much as possible, whether that's in the chat or maybe if some of you are comfortable coming off video and talking to us, that would be fantastic. Basically, we've been living and learning in this process, in this journey towards justice. And so the education programs here, we've been connecting and making meaning is sort of the big ideas that we keep thinking about. And I guess I should ask here is a good question to have Anna throw up a quick poll to find out how many of you have actually been to the murals in person. So I'll give you a second to just click, yes, I've been there. No, I've never been there before. So it looks like everyone's answered. Only one person's not been here before. So hopefully, for whatever reason, you may not have been here before. Maybe we'll get you to come visit soon. And for those of you who've been here before, that's fantastic. I might ask you just to throw in the chat if you have a favorite mural. And if you don't know the actual title, that's fine. Maybe describe it in a couple words. What is your favorite? What's your favorite mural or most memorable one? Oh, Mickey said, Mary on the battlefield very enthusiastically. I'll give everyone one more minute to just think about it. What? Jackie, I like that it is called Mary on the battlefield. she's pretty pissed off though, I agree. So we've got sort of a whole range. Mary with the soldiers seems to be the one popping up for many of you as either memorable or your favorite. I love it. I wish that we could be in the church looking at those and pointing them out. But I just wanted sort of to bring front of mind the murals, the space, even though we can't be there in person today. So one of the things I wanted to quickly just run through, we don't have a huge number of programs, right? We've been building these very slowly for the last about 10 years. There has been a docent program with tours that are a little more structured, right? That there's Saturday tours. There have been these table talks in person, and we pivoted very seamlessly, I think, virtually with these table talks and some of our other events. But more recently, since I've been consulting and since I have been director of education, we have started piloting some family programs. And we've piloted well, I guess we haven't been able to pilot school programs because of the pandemic, but that is one of our next steps. So I wanted to just share some of the memorable moments from these family programs. So you see this journey. What we're seeing here, and just to share very briefly, I don't want to talk too much about these, and the slide on the right, in the image, you see some younger kids. They were there with their parents looking at a sketch, one of the Vanka collection sketches of Mary on the battlefield. And so many of you love this one. And then they had the postcard, so they didn't have to crane their neck to look at the mural. They were comparing, contrasting what changed, what had stayed the same, how that felt different between his plan and his execution. And the kids were really into that sort of what's the same, what's different, and looking very closely. And on the left, I know it doesn't seem like much is happening there, but the kids were actually having a deep conversation about wealth and inequity and privilege. They were voting for things with coins, but they'd been given their coins disproportionately. And it ended up with a very thoughtful conversation with the capitalist and simple family meal. On one of our other pilot programs, I really wanted to point out this idea of the intergenerational. We had a number of grandparents who had come with parents, with their kids. And these moments of the slide on the right, you can see some of the parents interacting with their kids. But what you can't see here is that there were two different parents who actually wrote postcards to members of their family, parents or grandparents who had died. And my prompt had been more for the kids to write a postcard to somebody that they missed or they hadn't seen in a while. And there was a very powerful moment where they were thinking about those that they'd lost, not just that were far away or that they couldn't see from COVID. So I bring us back here to those questions that I shared at the beginning of how we connect. And some of these things happened very purposefully. And some of these happened because it naturally was what the program led to. They were intergenerational learning. We tackled some of those hard to understand or explain issues in society, like the idea of privilege and wealth and what you can do with your wealth. And in those same ways that those sort of timeless ideas of thinking about those we've lost, some of those other ideas that we talked about in those programs were really sort of timeless. And some of these other ideas that are here in these questions, we'll come back to a little bit later. Because I wanted, Melissa Butler was there for all of those programs, for those family programs, to sort of facilitate the questions afterward. We asked all the participating families and kids about their experiences and just sort of taking note for us, which is amazing to be teaching and then also having somebody watching you teaching to take those really important reflective notes. But I wanted to have Melissa today talk to you about why close looking and slow is really important, and then actually get to do it with you guys. So Melissa, if you want to join us, I can stay here but be quiet. So you can see me.
Well, I would love you to stay there, and you don't need to be quiet. Thank you. I love the introduction you've given so far, and it's nice to be here with you all tonight. And it's nice that so many of you already have such knowledge of the murals themselves. So I think this will be a really rich conversation because as we share, we are really always open to learn more and to hear from you. All of this work is always in development. I was actually, all of the questions and the thinking that Becky shared around the beginning really came from Michelle and Anna and their collaboration. And it was Michelle who brought me in after it had already begun in 2018. I think time is a blur. I don't know, but I think it was 2018. Michelle can correct me. And I came in to help with documentation and storytelling, and then was a participant alongside the educators. 2019. Okay, thank you. Well, going in, perfect, thanks. A participant with educators and got to explore lots of the questions that Becky shared with you. And then in the second round of grants, we thought it might be interesting to explore family programming and to really look into the expertise of the docents. So we have educators who had a lot of expertise around pedagogical process, and we have all these docents that before, mostly the educators hadn't interacted with, not always, but mostly, and there's a deep wisdom in those docents and what they know and their experience. And so in the second round of the grant in January, just this past January 2021, I started interviewing and working with the docents led by the interpretive plan. So really thinking about how do we want participants, all ages of participants, to feel in the murals, and what do we want them to do? So thinking that we want them to feel welcome. And what does that really mean to feel welcome? We want them to feel awe, right? We want them to leave with more questions than answers. We want them to feel reflective and wondering and having connections to their lived experience. We want them to feel a sense of place and to connect it to their own senses of places in the world. And the things that we want them to do is we want them to make connections. We want them to reflect and question perspectives and be playful and unknow and re-see things. And we want them to communicate and share stories about and understandings about the murals, and go out into the world and talk about the murals. Hey, I was at this place and I saw this, and this looks like this, and I saw a bird, and oh, I'm seeing a bird here. So we let that interpretive plan really guide the kind of planning template and the engagement around the docents. And you know, it would have probably stayed at that level of beautiful ideas if it weren't for Becky. Becky came on board at just the perfect time, because then we had these ideas and we had this, shared learning from the docents, and we were able to do some pilots and then describe what was happening in the pilots. And so really Becky and I and groups of families got to play. We got to try out all these different ways of deepening engagement. And what does that mean? And we learned a lot. And we really, when we think about social justice, we are thinking about topics and content, surely, and we're also thinking about the how of engagement. What does it mean to deeply engage with something? What does it mean to expand engagement? What does it mean to allow all different ways of engagement, not one right way, not come in, sit in the pew and get information and learn it, so really a very exploratory, curious way of learning. And so we explored movement. We did a lot of movement as engagement, and music as engagement, and acting things out as engagement. We played with ways of asking open-ended questions, ways of asking simple questions that are open-ended. We found ways to slow down the looking, and slow down the feeling, and slow down the conversation. And we explored ways to look closely and to frame ways of looking. So whether it's framing with looking tubes, which we did, or framing through actual frames, or framing through getting real close to something or real far away from something, or framing in what we're going to do in just a little bit around taking crops of images, so pieces of murals, and looking there, and then expanding the frame of the view a little bit further, and looking there, and then there, and outward, to grow slowly a layered conversation. And why that's so important is that when we allow noticing to be enough, right, and we trust that noticing is enough, everyone gets to bring their full selves to the conversation. You get to bring whatever you see to the conversation, whatever colors, whatever shapes, whatever stories, whatever memories, whatever dreams, whatever worries, whatever hates, whatever loves, to the conversation. So starting from that level of noticing, everyone gets to come as they are. Everyone gets to feel welcome. It's accessible to the community. It expands listening. It expands acceptance of listening. There's no right way. So it's not like, what is this? And I answer it and there's a right answer. And so someone feels like they don't know something. Everyone knows a lot, and everyone gets to bring what they know to add to the conversation slowly. And it's inherently reflective and connective to self. So it's not just about the murals. It is always intrinsically about the person who is doing the looking, the person who is doing the feeling. And so it inherently allows those deeper connections and the bringing of the murals with you when you leave. And so that's the deeper rationality to why we are focused on that slow noticing and close looking. And the reason why we focused on that pedagogical approach, learning from the wisdom of docents, learning from the wisdom of educators, bringing those together, lots of overlap in that Venn diagram, and then practicing things that could work with a 3-year-old and a 100-year-old. Right. And what we found just in Becky's sharing of that postcard experience is that everything that we tried as a pedagogical method, as a way of asking a question or a way of looking, worked well, differently and deeply for a 3-year-old or for someone who had been to the murals many times and had lived decades long with experience. And so those are the sorts of things that we were exploring. And again, we learned a lot, and we're still learning. And that's the beauty of it, that every time we try this, we learn something else, because every group sees something new. So we're going to try this together. And what we're going to try is having a conversation through the chat. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask Becky to change the slide. Not quite yet. She's going to show the slide. And there's a big hint on what the next slide is right now, because it's right there already. But you're going to look at the frame of what you see. And even if you know a lot about this mural, even if you know the title or you know the history or you know the context, try to limit your view to just what you see. And I want you to describe what you see. And as much as possible, just describe. And you may have an interpretation, like something like, it feels sad, right? Or I see worry. Those would be interpretive. Then just say why. It feels sad because, and give the descriptor that made you feel that way. And if not, I'll ask questions to kind of nudge that. And what I'd like you to do is when you look, because we're going to do this 5 times. So there'll be a slide, you're going to look, you're going to describe, and then we'll go to the next slide. So we're going to layer this. And if you just put one idea at a time in the chat and just send it right away, don't need to hold it for this, just send it and then read what other people are saying. And so it's kind of like you're listening. So we're almost imagining that we're together, we're looking, and there's like, everybody's just popcorning, saying things that they notice, right? And so if you write one thing, listen to maybe 3, 4, 5 others, add another, and just try to grow a layered noticing conversation. And thank you, Becky. Answers can be typed right here in the chat. Perfect. So let's go to the first. I'm not going to give you any context about this mural because we're going to start with just what you see, who you are, and anything that you notice is perfect right there. Thanks. Okay. And here I am listening to you by reading. The thorns are prominent. Loneliness. So I'd ask, what about that seems lonely, or what about that seems still? Maybe there's some negative space. Maybe there's a color, a fresh rose cut off from its roots, thorns. White paint, really white paint on the rose petals. It's all alone. Some has broken off, those little petals. It's reaching up for help. So maybe you see that curve, the curve of the stem seems like it's reaching. And maybe you're thinking it's for help because something else in the frame. Beautiful. Let's layer the next slide, Becky. Oh, strewn, not careful placement. Black back. The next slide, Becky. Okay. All right. So again, and you might notice the same things and then add what else you noticed. Light shining down, contemplation. And what do you see that makes you think of contemplation? Not dropped, slaughtered. There's a relationship now because there's 2 subjects, hands folded. So hands folded is contemplated. And someone else might think, I wonder if there's someone else here when they see hands folded, if they think of something else besides contemplated, because then we can really bring in our other experiences. Stillness, quiet, working hands. What makes you think they're working hands? What do you see? Mourning. And what makes you think it's mourning and loss? Help. Hands folded can be helpless, resigned to fate, angst, isolation. a dark crease in the knees of the dress. If I was with a group right now, I might layer in, if you're looking here and you see stillness and you see mourning, what might you see around this frame that would no longer make it stillness or would no longer make it mourning? Right? So sometimes you can ask the opposite question and they can think, well, if this was, like children would say, if that was in a, a park or a fair, it might no longer look, right? Waiting with hands on lap. A circus, right? A rose bush full of blooms, and you're sitting there as if you just trimmed it, and yeah. So again, it's interesting because we bring so much to our looking. There's there's never just objective descriptive looking, and we bring our knowledge of the murals, we bring our knowledge of this mural, we bring our knowledge of the topic of this conversation, we bring that to our gaze, right? And so do children. Actually, it's the 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds that are usually the most just matter of fact about things. And as adults, we piece in the bits of the story. So we actually are seeing what we want to see, right? So this really is a good exercise to stripping that down. All right, let's go to the next. So now we're not building from that image. It's a whole other image in the mural. What do you notice? Heaviness. And you already know what I'm going to say. What makes it heavy? Describe the piece that makes it heavy. The women look like ghosts. And what makes it look like ghosts? Is it because they're wearing white? I don't know. They're transparent. One more death, as you see one coffin. Quiet of the hill, the busyness of the field. Aha. So one of the hill, many of the crosses. Ah, the implied weight of the casket, because the head, crushed by the weight and the sorrow. Okay, so this is, Jackie, the sorrow, because there's gray sky, there's a graveyard, there's clouds, and there's a barren hill. All real clear descriptors. Seems far away. And we're looking, is that smoke or clouds? What do you think? Well, I know Becky, but imagine. And what might you think differently if it was smoke? What might you think or feel? If it was clouds, what might you think or feel? Smoke. You see you think you see airplanes, and maybe someone else sees something else. If you don't see airplanes, say what you see. Yeah, the volume of deaths. The positioning of those crosses. Airplanes are vultures, maybe. So we're inferring the mills still run. And so that, like, all of the things that you are bringing to your description have to do with what you know, your histories, the stories that your family have told you, the books that you have read, the things you care about. And so in a conversation space at the church, we would be able to call on Jackie, who knows something about the mills, to share a little bit with someone there who doesn't, right? And someone who knows about the vastness of losses could share. And again, it takes us back to the how of the enacting social justice in the moment of conversation, allowing everyone to bring who they are. No light, and so no hope. All right, let's go to the next. You already know the question. Even knowing what the cross is, that's a good point, Becky. Yeah, because we know that children would say those are T's unless they had an experience, right? In fact, I know a lot of children that would be going, you know, as they're reading the T's. So Rick has a connection. So now there's like, there's some some of what you noticed and described might be confirmed with a larger context. Sometimes it's like, oh, maybe not. And so we get to, you know, have noticing be play. It's about being wrong. It's about letting yourself be wrong. It's about listening to the perspective of others and saying, oh, let me see it a different way. Let me not know something. The candle light. So now you're seeing the candle. So that could be beautiful, especially if we used a tube to like look for moments of hope and then let people share. This is a moment of hope to me because it's a candlelight. This is a moment of hope for me because I like how the clouds are floating or something. And death, it's way to the other side of the road. The uniform star amidst. So that's a great example of like, we're seeing more details that we can just describe and wonder about there. And the placement of the ribbon, that's something that always comes up with this mural. And some people know a lot about it and some people have more wonderings. The big black cross with birds and planes. So we see more of that. Yeah, and I like that in that, another thing that we practiced is to use conditional language a lot. And so may and maybe, it might be, so it might still be the birds or planes. So you heard somebody call them planes. We're not trying to make that person wrong just because we see them as birds. And so we hold it up as planes or birds, or maybe birds, right? Right. That's what we're doing. Yeah. So we could go on with the, you know, a lot of other things, and Becky could actually share more about some of the movement gesture work that she's done. This could be an interesting mural to mimic gesture. And one of the things we found with younger audiences is that acting something out then gives you words to describe it. So if you have a group that's not talking very much, you know, you act it out and then there's more words. Well, let's go to the final slide, which is now the whole of the mural. And now let's try to do one more layer of what do you notice? Line of crosses. So the sharing, and you could see them facing each other, close together. I don't know if we notice mouths open, all women, or all, yeah, because we see dresses and we're inferring that dresses mean women. We know the time period. Covering their faces. That would be a good one to act out, to get like, what does that feel? What are the different reasons why you cover your face? The absence of men. And you know, this, Jackie, what you just mentioned is something that, you know, in these family programs, we've focused on usually 2 murals, but there's always been some sort of connection. And one of the through lines in the murals is looking at mothers and women and the role, right? Another through line is justice. Another through line are birds. We did a whole family programming around birds, both the actual birds we saw and then the kind of the metaphoric of a bird. And so the absence of men could be a through line. One reading maybe prayers like that maybe this. women with strong hands. And I wonder if that connects back to somebody earlier who said working hands. And I wonder if working hands, what is a working hand? What does a working hand look like? What are different ways a hand can work? What are different kinds of strong hands? And this is a lovely question. And actually, Becky, that's a good one to, Becky is going to give some background on this mural when we're done here almost. Is there a significance of the placement of the blue bandwidth? Yes, yes. Yes, interesting. Oh, and Becky already said yes, because she likes to answer that. All right, I think that we could go on. One thing that we know is that noticing is enough, and asking what do you notice can go on. And there's an infinity to that in that smallness. And all that can happen is more of yourself and more layers of learning together, honoring what you know, honoring what you wonder, exposing what you see as coming from who you are and how you've been raised, and all of the biases and perspectives that you hold on to. So thank you for engaging in this exercise. And it's just one of many that we've been playing around with to really slow down the looking and expand the community, and make sure that everyone has a deep and rigorous and playful experience, no matter what their age, and that they leave the murals excited to talk about them and with more questions than they came in with. So thanks.
Yes, and Melissa, like the things that you're talking about too, I feel like I'm hoping that the people in the chat, all of you watching, are kind of feeling like, oh, I want to keep talking about this. Like, I keep noticing more things, because honestly, I've looked at this so many times, and I was noticing things, especially because we were so close to that rose. So I think each time we come back, even for docents who grew up with these murals and have been docents for 10 years, they still find things that are new to sort of like, oh, what is that there? I wanted to answer a couple of the questions and give a little context to this, just so if those of you who are maybe not as familiar with it, that this is the Croatian mothers raised their son for war. And it's actually based on a painting that Vanka did in 1915. He was in the Belgium Red Cross in World War I. So he was in art school in Belgium, and he joined the Red Cross. So he was not fighting, but he experienced what was happening during the war. But this is a scene in Croatia. A lot of people ask if these are nuns. That's sort of the first thought. Nobody in the chat said that, but maybe you all know that these are the traditional clothing of mourning in a particular village outside of Zagreb in Croatia, where they would wear white, and they would wear these very intricately pleated white dresses. Yes, Rich is saying they're typical mourning clothes. So maybe you all knew that already. But the question about the significance of the sashes, I love this because you noticed it. Then most of the women have those sashes at their waist. The woman seated has it at her breast, which tells us that that is the woman who is this fallen soldier's mother, right? She was the one who nursed him as a child. So we can identify her among the mourning women specifically as the mother. You know, and each time we look at this, I had a guest today ask if the woman on the other side was his wife or his girlfriend or, you know, his betrothed. And I've never thought about that before, you know, and so that interpretation, we don't know, right? Vanka didn't write down, here's who each of these people are. We know about the sashes as a tradition. We don't know who, you know, these aren't named people, but I think it leaves it open for those kinds of bigger interpretations and thinking through stories that might, oh, I think of this story because I know of that as an personal experience or something I've learned about. Yes, and Anna pointed out Mati, which is the mural right to the side of this one. If you've been in the church, Mother Croatia is identified also as a mother because of where her sash is. Melissa, were there any other things that popped up in that chat that I might be able to answer with this? Or maybe if anyone throws in the chat, like, I have a burning question.
Yeah, I think most of the questions, there were there's a lot that could be talked about. I don't know if anybody had like something burning question. So maybe they can
So-
write here or say.
You can send me a question and I can try to answer it, if I even know. But I think this is a good moment to sort of keep moving. And I sort of want to like zoom out from this mural. And actually you can see Mati there on the side, to sort of pull us back out, right? We got really close with Melissa. We're going to zoom back out for a little bit and think about what we mean by this, like learning and living through justice too, because this is about how we make connections, right? It's sort of the day-to-day, but I want to pull us back to think about sort of the ideas that have to be in the back of our head all the time. And I come back to this slide again, as I pass this over to Michelle, in thinking more about the equity, the social justice, accessibility, and also thinking about our own complex identities and those of others, and how we sort of fit that into planning for programs, implementing programs, and constantly questioning ourselves too. So passing this over to Michelle, there she is, the instigator herself.
Thank you. Hello, beautiful people. I'm a former middle school teacher, maybe always middle school teacher. So how is everybody's spirit? Just in the chat. So I know I'm still alive and I'm not talking to artificial intelligence. All right. You can freestyle with an emoji. Beautiful. Good to know. Spirits are good. Yes. I left the classroom 4 years ago to answer different kinds of questions and to be in community with folks who are really interested in learning and in grappling with the ways that keep it separate from each other. And so I want to give first a shout out to Brian Wulovich. I am here because of him. I'm here because of our relationship. Anna reached out to him to work on this project, and he's like, I have too much, but I have a friend who may be interested. And that set the relationship for maybe it's probably going to be a lifetime of troublemaking with Anna and the Vanka Murals, because it's great to meet people who are passionate about things that they're interested and care about deeply. And I was taken by her passion. And then when I walked into the church, I was like, how's that possible? And so I was taken by the arts. I was taken by the thinking of this as a text to be studied, to be observed, to wonder about. And it also makes me think about what am I leaving behind that is worthy of study, that is worthy of holding, grappling with, but also what am I leaving that might feed future generations? And I think about this space as the capacity to nourish us, to hold us in community and hold us in discourse as we live and learn towards justice. Justice is a living concept. We often talk about it like an endpoint, but it is a living concept, much like love and community. You had go ahead and go on to the next slide. Thank you, Becky. Appreciate your labor. So out of this conversations that started on a very small scale with Anna and myself, breaking bread and listening and also trusting this wild and wacky journey, we came up with Convene, Create, Conspire. And in that was to, how might I bring folks that I've engaged with their scholarship and aspirations and bring these folks together from different parts of the city, different walks of life, to be in discourse and thinking about how the Vanka Murals could be a generative space. And so we met month after month, really with the intention of really slowing down and talking to each other and speaking from our lived experiences and holding a question about how might this space be a place to connect, to activate art, to design and create from, to situated in different communities with different aspirations. You can go into the next one. And in that work, right, you know, like if you really want to hold yourself honest about this work, you have to ask yourself critical questions. And I feel compelled to move us past the performative nature of justice and wokeness to the real kind of practice, which is not neat, it is messy, and it is ongoing work. And so in coming together, one of the things that helped get us there was to think about what undergirds any kind of designing of learning. There's always, in anything actually, there are values in buildings, there are values in text, there are values in our classrooms, our homes, our communities. And if we really want ways for people to connect and be in community and be in right relationship with each other, we must interrogate the values that are both implicit and explicit. You can go on to the next one. So this is, we sat for at least 1.5 of our meetings, really kind of looking at other design principles. I want to give a shout out to the Design Justice Network out of Allied Media and their work in thinking about, how can we really be radically inclusive and actually be critical about what we mean by inclusion or what we mean by diversity as we think about this work. Like, what does it really mean to be radically inclusive? How do we hold and grapple with this? And so what you're seeing as we talk about very specific and general aspects of the educational work here is really seeing a group of people over time grappling with ideas and aspirations in practice. You can go ahead into the next one. So out of that, a couple of years later, because I don't really understand time, but there was like a before time, before year zero. I think somebody called it 2019. But in that time, in the last couple of years, now there is a kind of a working template of our own design justice principles. We're going to convene this Saturday. In fact, we are now in the second major iteration of the convening of educators. Create, convene, create, connect. And that's what we're going to be doing on Saturday and co-creating and designing together. But I think one of the most basic things that we often overlook is our slowing down to be in relationship with each other over time. There is something very magical and amazing about staying with an idea, staying with projects over time. Another, I think I want to pull from some of these design principles is we were really thinking about this notion of intergenerational work. In human history, we have long been intergenerational. It seems of late we're very much segregated by age as well as many other factors, class, race, and all kinds of things. But how might we hold a space so people can come and be in discourse, to be in relationship, and to think about how each of us represents big data, right? And I'm sure even on this call, we probably have easily several hundred years of lived experience, of human lived experience. Each of us in our own particular bodies, ages, races, lived experience, histories represent a truth about what it means to be human. And I'm interested in symphonic truth. So both that kind of individual thread, but that collective knowing. And so I'm very honored that that Anna trusted me and all the folks that I got to be in community with and continue and learn to be in community with, like Becky, and partnering with others. We have some new friends on the block who are joining us. Shout out to Zaina Ruiz, who'll be a partner, and seeing how we keep building upon this and keep building in the richness that comes out of it. You can go on to the next one. And this is just a little snapshot of some of our work. We've worked with, we had lots of tiny experiments working with young people. We got to work with kids at, I was going to say, oh my gosh, my brain just fried. Little help.
Remake Learning Days.
This one's from Remake Learning, but I'm thinking about when we did remember the Vanka mural zines with the kids from
This is a Millvale Community
Arsenal.
Library?
Arsenal Middle School with the art.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So this is just a little bit of snapshot. This is from Remake Learning Days. I believe you can, we often think like, oh, young people are not aware and we can't talk to little kids, middle school kids about things like justice or injustice or race. But I come back again to how we are experiencing and making sense of the world. I had some incredible, robust discussions talking about justice and injustice and what they felt. I mean, they are experiencing and making sense of the world just alongside with us. I often feel when people say, oh, look at all the learning loss that has happened in the last couple of years, the whole world has been in a giant classroom where we have been learning what we value as Americans, as humans, what we don't value, what we're, the suffering that is happening right in front of us. And so this whole space is a classroom. How might we learn from what we're experiencing right now and also from each other? And how do we hold spaces? Because the thing is, young people also want to talk about these issues. I've just reading recently the deep and present fear around climate change. Even as adults may not want to address it and may or may not have a sense of urgency, young people see that. They also see that in terms of racial reckoning and inequities that are. So how do we hold the space? And also how do we engage teachers and help them trust themselves, be able to also do this work? You can go on to the next slide. So also do this with, and it's a great time to ask even like, how do you see about this? What are your feelings about this? Say more about this. And I think we're often surprised like how deep and thoughtful young people are and how much they've been noticing and how much they've been aware of what's happening around them through TV, through all kinds of portals of news and entertainment. You can go on to the next one. So I've really been interested in this notion of a living concept of justice. And I think about this quote. And what really strikes me in the Vanka murals is the positionality of the different murals. And I find that very powerful because there is a space created in between that. And what does it mean? Like what discourse is present in the in-between spaces and the things that are across from it? And you can even think about that in terms of your own life, that space between me living in 2021 in my particular body, history, and lived experience, and I'm looking at something that was created in the late 30s and 40s. And yet there is something in between me and that artwork that's in discourse, and then the people around. And so I love and that's happening completely and throughout the museum, is this discourse between the art itself and also the observer and also the other witnesses. And that's rich, right? Like that's an amazing inheritance to leave behind for people to continually see your creation to be in discourse with. So I love this quote: justice is present when collectively we see each other as persons who are fully human, uniquely created, and worthy of attention, affection, and affirmation. And if you go on to the next one, and then I want to ask us. And I also love, and we had an opportunity to work with several quotes and images about justice. But I also love this one: tenderness is what love feels like in private, and justice is what love looks like in public. So whether you've been to the murals or not, I want to afford you to hold this question. If you go on to the next slide for me. What is your living definition of justice? And so I want to give us about like 4 minutes and just hold, just type, but don't send your answer yet. But let's give us at least until 7:40 and write, what is your living definition of justice? Some of you are already putting your answers in, so feel free to add your current working definition. And we have a lot of richness, so I would love to have some voices other than mine. I don't know, when we have an opportunity, but I would love to hear how people are thinking about and responding to. And rich put a really rich provocation to come to engage with. So is it possible to open it up to folks to add their voice to the space? Just kind of what you're noticing or observing or in the discussion, you can speak back in the chat or offer your lovely sounds out here. And I'll ask one more question in relation to this, which is, name at least one personal practice that you're doing to keep your working definition of justice alive. What is one practice that you're doing right now?
Michelle, did I capture your question in the chat? I was trying to write what you said for anybody
Yes.
who might have.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder if Jackie, you could say more about walking questioning. I'm a big fan of what they say. I want to live in a world that contains many worlds. I don't know this walking questioning.
Hey folks, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I've learned a whole lot from working with other activists, and that's how I came to meet Michelle. And Michelle, I'm so grateful for your providing this space for us to think together. But walking questioning is a really amazing idea that I share with a lot of activists I work with. I do political advocacy work, and we often know that we don't really know how to change the things we're trying to change. I do a lot of policy work and really trying to make the world very different from how it is. So we don't really know how to get there, but when we're working with people who share that commitment, we can see what the next step is. And so as long as we're questioning and are open to hearing how other people are understanding our situation and the conditions that we're facing and the opportunities we might have to push for change, we can have clarity on that next step. And another phrase that activists like to say is making the path as we walk. And I think it's important to listen, but also to have some confidence that we need to act, and but act together and in a conversation with other folks who are thinking about how to move the values that we share to forward.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Jackie. Yes, and you know that work is hard. I appreciate you've asked me to be in community with you and doing work on all kinds of projects, from human rights to preventing Amazon from coming here to continue to cause more harm to people and the environment. And yeah, it's messy work, it's hard work, and it requires us to be in relationship and walk and find that way together, right? We're living in other people's imaginations currently, right? And so what is the work that we can do to live into other possibilities, particularly a future or futures that are just and compassionate and loving. Thank you for letting us call you in. I want to call my team in too, if there are comments, offerings. Observations, noticings, curiosities.
Michelle, I appreciate, all of the sort of thinking about this, and we've had some really interesting comments coming through too. And it sounds like nobody wants to brave besides Jackie wants to brave talking. But I think pointing out just that people are sort of commenting on like, how can art be that place for bringing these conversations together? And I think that's sort of how that all relates in this project with the murals of how can talking to schools, talking to families, bringing educators together, and hopefully the next steps of that is bringing different communities together. A number of people I noticed said, what their practice right now is trying to meet people that are different than themselves, to listen to people that are different. And I think that might get to Rich's comment too about those that feel like, I don't want this to happen, but they maybe benefited from you said something like the softening of their hearts, right? To sort of see that they benefited maybe in the past, of finding those places for conversation within the stories of the murals, within the stories of what people are experiencing today. Just sort of bringing it back to the murals in this last 10 minutes that we have today too.
And maybe this exercise, just for the audience this exercise that Michelle's just led us through, some of us have participated in her leadership of this before, and it's I just think back to like Becky's expertise in working with the docents and doing tours of the Vanka murals, and how we're really expanding and shifting how to experience the murals, that it's not come in and get a tour of everything. You can come in and spend 2 hours around this one question. What is your living definition of justice? And, Michelle spread out all sorts of quotations, time, silence to pick one that resonates with you, time to be with yourself, time to write, time to share with one person, time to have a conversation with one person, time to get up and walk around and talk to some other people, then time to share, then time to look at justice and injustice. So it's a real stretched out slowness and a depth to it that then lets people leave with a deeper sense of themselves and the murals without necessarily knowing all of the murals, right? But we're finding that people want to come back with this approach. So just wanted to say that, Michelle, because I'm not sure I already got the sense of the big scope of what you do with this question.
Yeah, beautiful. I appreciate that. And I appreciate because I think there is a richness, and it's why I enjoy working with you also, because we recognize what is needed. And I think about what Nina Simone said, the artist's duty is to reflect the times. And it's so powerful like that, and how do we use art to do that? And how do we trust? So it's great that I get to partner with other people who believe in silence and believe that actually a little thing can be more than enough. right? And that we can build on that. And that's been a very generative and refreshing and nourishing as a teacher, as a human being, as a Black woman, as a mother. All these things get to be affirmed by being in this space and being with folks that trust that we can co-create ways to be with each other that are in community. And so I want to just go to the last slide in this. My heart's aspiration, and I love all the people who are with me with their heart's aspiration, which is the beloved community. This was popularized by Martin Luther King, but not his idea, and existed before him. And that torch has been carried by so many others, Bell Hooks, Grace Lee Boggs, and us, a little small community of loving people who have a heart's aspiration that is greater than our imagination and beyond this moment, is to live into justice. So thank you very much for your time and attention and showing up.
And thank you, Michelle. I know a few people are having to jump off, but I hope that sort of this journey and these through lines that we're sharing today, I mean, we've been doing much more, but we wanted to kind of hone in on a few of the things and some of these through lines that have been connecting our work, and as we move forward, and hopefully can be having more and more audiences here together that we'll be able to continue talking about these hard conversations and living and learning through justice. I did want to share one other sort of little shout out, because one of our school partners, that the sort of partnerships, I should say, if some of you are not familiar with the Light Education Initiative, I'd love to point you their direction. Nick Haberman is a high school teacher in Shaler who started this group. And if you can see on that slide, LIGHT stands for Leadership Through Innovation in Genocide and Human Rights Teaching. And they're familiar and love the group that are working on this project in schools to find spaces where they can talk about human rights. And that's not just high school, it is spreading into different schools as sort of like these maker spaces where they can address these ideas with students. They've come here and want to bring students here in partnership. And I think it's this just like really great fit between what we were talking about and some of the questions and the topics that they're talking about in their classrooms, and really trying to make that a cool fit. Just wanted to put a little shout out there at the end of these last few minutes, because I know Anna put her face back up here, because I know that means we have to have our concluding housekeeping and wrap up.
Well, I really wanted to say I've had the privilege of working on this project for now, talk about time, Michelle, 12 years. And I saw so much and got so much out of this collaboration and bringing these diverse perspectives in to talk about the murals. I saw things I would never have seen and noticed things. And Melissa knows this too. I'm a hard person to slow down. So it's been a really great exercise. And we are just looking for all of you to help us continue to sort of build the community around the murals, and to really help us bring them, as we said, off the walls and into the community, which is our sort of, one of our big pieces of work, in addition to the work that we do to save the murals and do the restoration work. So I do have to do so I just want to say thank you to Becky and Melissa and Michelle for this and for all the work you've been doing and will continue to do. We will share this recording on our website along with our other Vanka Murals table talks. I also just wanted to mention that I did put the links in for the call for artists, and also the next table talk, which is on October 6th. And also just really want to invite everyone to sort of stay engaged with us, because we are doing more, you'll continue to see more sort of non-traditional programming come from us, but also we will be hopefully getting back to our conservation programs soon. And and the other thing that I always like to remind people is when we clean the murals, we find so much more. So there's a lot more to discover that's not been seen for probably the last 90 years. So, almost 90 years. So thanks again for being here. And we hope you'll tune in again. And thank you. Good night.